Wearing platform boots and velvet capes, Stevie Nicks was the ethereal queen of Fleetwood Mac, moving from stage to stage. The collision between these two universes was passionate, explosive, and ultimately destructive. Their romance was anything but enchanting behind the scenes. The fast-burning affair between Joe and Stevie was characterized by turmoil, addiction, and emotional wounds. At one point, he was everything to her, and she pursued him as if he were her only hope. The darker side, the envy, the emotional blackmail, and the never-ending conflicts driven by cocaine and damaged egos, however, were hidden from the general public. Decades later, Joe Walsh finally shares his story today. Yet what he discloses is not what fans might have thought of as fantasy. He depicts Stevie as a complex, demanding, and disturbed lady whose own troubles influenced everyone around her, rather than as a fairy tale goddess. Joe Walsh was the great love of Stevie Nicks' life, but the truth was more sinister. Substance misuse and extreme emotional fluctuations plagued their relationship as it grew into an obsession. Imagine this. After long nights of drug-fueled panic, yelling bouts, and broken promises before dawn, hotel rooms were destroyed. Desperate to retain Joe in her sphere of influence, Stevie clung to him. However, Joe saw that their love was not getting better. It was filling. Her mood swings, manipulation, and emotional outbursts were too much for him to take. He was struggling to keep himself together, but she needed to be saved. And it ended with a terrible ending. There was no mutual respect, no quiet farewell. There was a trail of devastation, contempt, and quiet. While Joe left, Stevie carried that heartache with her like an unhealing wound. She also ensured that others felt it. Joe Walsh wasn't the only person caught in the snares. Stevie Nicks' world is in disarray. Her orbit was both volatile and magnetic. Enticing others with charm and magic, then setting them on fire emotionally. She collected more than simply platinum records over the years. She gathered unresolved feuds, injured egos, and grudges. Her long-standing conflict with Chrissie Hynde of The Pretenders is likely well known to you. What started out as mutual respect between two strong female rock stars swiftly devolved into icy looks and harsher language. Stevie's magical floating image didn't appeal to Chrissie, who was tough and pragmatic. She made fun of the shawls. Accused her of concealing herself behind a fake identity through the veils and theatrics. Despite being hurt and defensive, Stevie resisted giving up. The atmosphere between them became frigid. The dressing rooms had to be positioned on opposing sides of the venue, turning festivals into battlegrounds. I was at a loss for what to do. I doubted I would ever be humorous again. I had doubts about my ability to compose music. The silent war followed. With Carlyle, Belinda. Stevie allegedly accused Belinda of copying her ethereal style in the mid-1980s, when pursuing a solo career meant surviving, in an attempt to steal the thunder of a woman who had established her reputation thanks to Heartbreak and Velvet. Industry rumors described yelling matches backstage, ugly looks at award events, and interviews filled with barely disguised taunts. Despite the fact that both women smiled for the cameras, their antagonism permeated every interaction. However, the most scathing betrayals might have come from Stevie's closest friends and family rather than from rivals. Sharon Solani and Laurie Nicks, who were once her backing vocalists, did more than just provide vocal support. They were soulmates in harmony, sisters. Together, they completed each other's sentences, traveled the world for years, and endured the highs and lows of stardom together. But gradually, the fissures appeared. Stevie's demands grew too much to handle, and her moods became erratic. She would cry in their arms one day and then completely shut them out the next. There were rumors of altercations over backstage management, money, and credit. After a while, Laurie and Sharon were sick of being both caregivers and shadows. The link broke through a series of 100 small betrayals that culminated in silence rather than in a single explosive event. The kind of stillness that results from sadness rather than hatred. Stevie's journey through the music industry wasn't entirely smooth. It was characterized by the remains of shattered friendships, tainted coalitions, and unending feuds. She continued to smile on stage as the years passed. However, those who had supported her, stood by her side, or opposed her had discovered that the only way to love Stevie Nicks was to live through her. In Fleetwood Mac, fans always thought Stevie and Christine McVie were inseparable sisters. Two ladies who, on the surface, appeared to be unified in a maelstrom of male egos and backstage pandemonium. They were the soothing female presence in a band that was always on the edge of breaking apart. However, there were storms in their relationship behind the scenes. Imagine a kingdom ruled by two queens. A fight for power was inevitable sooner or later. Christine accused Stevie in private of being egotistical, untrustworthy, and tough to work with when the band disintegrated in the early 1990s due to personal issues and musical alienation. According to reports, she claimed that Stevie viewed Fleetwood Mac as a supporting role for her solo career, a side project that she could take on and abandon as she saw fit. Quiet bitterness curled from the warmth that had previously flowed between them. Christine was perceived by Stevie as aloof, passive-aggressive, and empathetic. Particularly during her most depressed episodes of addiction, when she thought Christine had emotionally checked out, she felt abandoned. Once a close friendship, it became a chilly professional tolerance. Midway through the 1990s, during the Time album era, the strain reached a breaking point. Christine reportedly gave the band an ultimatum, which was privately despised by both women. She would go if Stevie stayed. There was poison in the air. Meetings become questioning sessions. Sessions of recording were like navigating a minefield. After a long break, many people expected Christine's return to Fleetwood Mac in 2014 to be a reunion of old friends, but the scars had not been healed. According to reports, Stevie demanded complete creative control over the tour's course. Christine's recommendations were frequently rejected or changed to suit Stevie's style. The equilibrium has vanished. Like old times, the two grinned, giggled, and harmonized on stage. Off stage, however, the quiet was telling. They rarely shared a dressing room, traveled independently, and stayed in different hotels. For the sake of nostalgia and ticket sales, what fans mistakenly believed to be sisterhood had turned into a carefully crafted illusion. Their rift was cold, strategic, and emotionally devastating, but it was neither loud nor explosive. One of the most melancholy undercurrents in Fleetwood Mac was the gradual decline of their friendship. A quiet conflict between two women who supported one another in the past but are now separated by years of hurt, pride, and unresolved betrayal. Outside of the spotlight, Stevie Nicks' private life was a maze of unresolved conflicts, silent heartbreaks, and emotional burdens. Stevie was raised in a rigid, image-conscious household, and his defiance was spelled out in leather boots, eyeliner, and a microphone. However, there was a price for that rebellion, particularly in her relationship with her father, Jess Nicks. Jess was a prosperous businessman who valued structure, discipline, and conventional duties. He was disapproving of his daughter's transformation into a mysterious rock star. He never hid it, and he didn't comprehend her need for music, mayhem, and freedom. Within the family, their arguments were legendary. Her refusal to settle down, her appearance, and her professional choices were frequently attacked by Jess. In the 1980s, Jess emotionally separated himself from Stevie as he descended into addiction. Instead of seeing it as pain, he saw weakness. His meager attempts at intervention came across as more control than empathy. Infuriated and hurt, Stevie shoved him away. Barbara, her mother, was kinder and more understanding. However, she also had difficulties with her daughter's celebrity. Instead of a life filled with tours, lovers, scandals, and broken sleep, Barbara wanted Stevie to lead a peaceful life. She protected her daughter from detractors, but she was never able to completely understand the burden Stevie bore. Stevie, on the other hand, yearned for acceptance that never materialized. On holidays, as she walked in, the room would get rigid. The glitzy celebrity, who didn't resemble the young girl they remembered, left relatives unsure of how to respond. Stevie's loneliness increased when she had to make a life-altering choice. She became pregnant during her intermittent relationship with Don Henley in the late 1970s. Stevie decided to have an abortion because she was worried that becoming a mother would ruin her profession or make her life impossible. Her emotional recovery was never complete. Decades later, she said in interviews that the choice still troubled her and that she pondered what may have been. Stevie seemed to the world as a tough, self-reliant individual. In private, however, she lamented the love that always seemed just out of reach, the family she was never connected to, and the children she never had. Her notoriety turned into a jail and a shield. She constructed walls out of platinum records and stage lights. However, there was a lady inside those walls who secretly yearned for connection. The real Stevie, the one with the lipstick and scarf, was never entirely supported by her family, despite the glamour that surrounded her. Perhaps this explains why, even at her best, she frequently felt like a young woman attempting to prove herself to others who didn't fully think she could succeed on her own terms. The conflict between Stevie Nicks and Lindsey Buckingham was the most intense of all the blazing episodes in her life. Consider it to be the perpetual curse of Fleetwood Mac. It was both thrilling and frustrating to watch two soulmates engage in an artful dance. There was no denying their chemistry on stage, but behind the scenes they had endured years of emotional conflict, treachery, and unhealed scars. When they first started dating, they were merely two struggling musicians hoping to become famous in the late 1960s. They were growing up in the rock scene together, inseparable, and creatively connected. However, their emotional equilibrium started to break down the more they immersed themselves in the field. Stevie and Lindsey's personal relationship had already broken down by the time Fleetwood Mac reached their commercial zenith in the middle of the 1970s. But they still had to stand inches apart on stage and sing songs full of anguish and coded hostility night after night. Every lyric turned into a weapon. Every harmony concealed a disagreement. Their performances resembled psychological theater rather than music. Their power struggle grew more intense as Lindsey resented Stevie's burgeoning solo career in the 1980s. He felt abandoned. She charged him with brutality and spirit stifling. For the sake of her ego, he said, she left the band. According to friends, the tension backstage was intolerable. Recording sessions frequently ended with walkouts, tears, or slammed doors. The infamous 2018 split followed. The truth was much more bitter than the official narrative, which was ambiguous. Lindsey's actions at a Fleetwood Mac tribute performance apparently made Stevie feel degraded. She gave them an ultimatum: either he leaves or she does, according to people close to the band. Stevie is hoed by management. Lindsey had left. The result was a media frenzy. There were lawsuits. Like daggers, accusations were hurled. He was blindsided, according to Lindsey. "I've had enough," Stevie said. The band broke. Ancient wounds tore open. And for a lot of fans, that was the last time they would ever see the entire original lineup together. Their tale was one of tragedy encased in standing ovations and gold records. It was like Stevie herself, beautiful, ugly, and unforgettable. However, decades later, their shattered and twisted bond still reverberates in the songs they used to sing to one another like a persistent ghost. The reality that no one dared to speak out loud until Joe Walsh finally broke the quiet is now all that's left after decades have passed. The curtain has been raised. It is no longer possible for fans to act as though Stevie's story was solely about gold and glitter. In addition, it was tainted by conflict, ego, and the harm she caused and suffered. Yes, her legacy is enormous, but it is also tainted. Plagued by the debris left behind in her storm, by friends lost, and by voices muted. Instead of opening a door to fiction, Joe's words have opened one to reality. Stevie left a legacy of abandoned friendships, shattered relationships, personal sacrifices, and artistic implosions. She was adored, feared, revered, and occasionally despised by others. And what really makes her unique is that complicated reality, unadulterated and unrefined. She was more than just the voice behind well-known ballads and a muse to rock icons. She was a woman who strode into rooms demanding attention and occasionally paid the price for it. She was a hurricane in velvet. Being great came with a price, and both she and those who came into her life had to pay for it.